Chill here with Sirius Talis Moon. This is Jupiter hour, moon night. And the moon is 20 degrees Leo. Ascendant adjacent to Beta Persei. Ruled by Venus. Venus 29 degrees Leo. We're almost done with the Epstein list. Look, I listened to a beautiful song about Trump being on the Epstein list. And then there was folks that projected the relationship between Epstein and Trump onto this huge looking, I don't remember what was it, the Windsor Castle. So yeah, I don't have popcorn with me, but this is Venus that is about to ingress into Virgo. We're wrapping up with the Epstein stuff. And by tomorrow we will be taking a break from Epstein's and Trump's and heading Navo. So let's talk about October astrology. Because the world is round, and although it does move, everything is questionable. Can we? Thank you. October. So, October, no, we want October. The heck is going with this? Yeah. October astrology. So, this is a month that opens with full moon in Aries, 14 degrees Aries, and Pluto going direct the week after. So October 7 we have a full moon in Aries, and October 14 we have Pluto going direct in 1 degree Aquarius. Then we have a new moon in Libra, October 21, a 28 degree Libra, which would be squaring Pluto in conjunct Neptune, Saturn, and in conjunct Uranus. We're going to have Neptune on October 22nd, re-ingressing into Pisces. And yes, that's enough. Mars will conjoin Lilith, Black Moon Lilith, together with Mercury, October 23 and 26, on 23 degree Scorpio. So, let's begin with the full moon in Aries. This is 7th October. And we're talking about middle decan Aries, Sun middle decan Libra. There's going to be a deeper realization. Mars both in Scorpio and invisible. So there's going to be a deeper realization of past mundane events to do with jurisdiction, trade, Venus in Virgo, journalism, particularly investigative journalism, litigations. Pluto and Mercury will be squaring Pluto in 0 degree Scorpio, Mars 10 degree Scorpio, and Lilith on the Chiron of the state of Israel, 21 degree Scorpio. Definitely there are going to be a lot of things that we weren't aware of when it comes to the psyops and the witchcraft, downright witchcraft. But this is the occultism around the violation of sexual sovereignty, particularly when it comes to real estate, and the wounded masculinity actually in Israel. So those disclosures will probably be there. Again, it's not the main event, but it is definitely going to expose some things of a very intrinsic, hidden, occultistic nature around real estate, litigation, army, of course, and it hits on the koran of Israel, which is to do with wounded masculinity, the army, and also jurisdiction. Perhaps it will touch on jurisdiction moves that were made in the world, and I'm getting the gist of shibush alichei din, which basically means times where the juristic procedure was intentionally interfered malefically. So that's the vibe. Again, it's not a main event. Okay, it's not an eclipse, it's a full moon, but this is going to be kind of in the background. Venus is going to enter Libra October 14, while Pluto is going direct. So let's take a look at this chart. Pluto going direct in 1 degree Aquarius. We want to think 6 months back we want to think even a year back, because basically it's going to the full point for when Pluto was going through that 1 degree, making the journey onwards for 6 months, then going retrograde for 6 months, and now it is going direct. So we're basically wrapping up a year of Pluto already being in Aquarius. At this point, there's a nice trine between Venus and Uranus. Which tells me, first of all, Venus in a closing trine to Pluto. There are going to be a lot of, not closures, but definitely wrapping up things around jurisdiction women, kidnapped women, and social engineering involving women. Mercury at this time is in 10 degrees Scorpio, where Mars was in the lunation, in the full moon. And Mars 14 degrees Scorpio, Black Moon Lilith 22 degrees Scorpio. And there is a sextile, of course, to Neptune. Saturn is 26 degrees Pisces retrograde, with Venus opposing mainly Neptune, but also separating from opposition to Saturn. The moon will be conjoining Jupiter on Procyon, applying to oppose this Pluto. So definitely there are going to be peace talks, but they're going to be on almost psychic level. There are going to be the opposition of Venus and the Saturn-Neptune here is a telltale of a fog that still exists around rituals to do with real estate and religion, and unfortunately what they call genocide. But there is some justice. I believe the word fairness is perhaps more appropriate than justice. It's a sweetening of something to do, with mass death and women that were kidnapped and real estate. But there is an opposition to Pluto from the Jupiter moon, and there is an opposition to Neptune Saturn with Venus. So there are basically two kite shapes in the sky, very, very transformational. Pluto is in general transformational, but this is an out of bounds Pluto. It means that it is less tied and more dominant in the chart. So the aspects will kind of be, hey, Pluto is doing its deeper exploration and oscillation of power in the domain where Saturn rules, and whatever is happening to Venus is in agreement with that. Okay, so that can look and in agreement also with Uranus, the conjoined Sedna in the background. Uranus still retrograde, Saturn, Neptune still retrograde, Chiron still retrograde, 25 degrees Aries, but Pluto already turning direct, which marks the beginning of the end of retrogression phase. Very beginning, okay, Uranus has a way to go, Neptune, Saturn, but this is a small beginning of coming out of a year long of rethinking, refining, readdressing, and with Pluto, tremendous oscillations of power. On a mundane level, again, peace talks, but those peace talks are not in alignment with what Pluto is doing, and this will accompany us for the year to come. So there's a big challenge. Procyon alone is very important here because this is a fixed star and perhaps the only one that can alleviate a little bit of the Pluto oscillation. Yet we're talking about a once in 3,000 year cycle of Pluto. Very, very powerful. And we're talking about Sedna in the background for the first time in 12 millennia in Gemini. New moon in Libra, 28 degrees Libra. This is October 21. And this is a new moon in Libra in T-square with Jupiter that is already conjoining Procyon and Pluto. No favorable aspect. It is in conjuncting Uranus and it is in conjuncting Saturn Neptune. So it is a yod shape and T-square shape. This new moon is challenged and challenging. Venus conjoining a star called Vendia Matrix. So to quote my teacher, Lada Duncheva, on Vendia Matrix, it's a star that is associated with both corruption and the correction of corruption in business. What type of business, I don't know, but this is a point of disruption. A new moon that has a point of disruption regarding corruption and correction of corruption around business. In the background, Mars, Mercury, and Lilith conjoin at the end of Scorpio, trine in Jupiter, trine in Saturn and Neptune, mainly Saturn. And very challenging new beginning. It's not an easy new beginning. It's the beginning of a cycle of disruption. And the yod shape conjoining with the T-square. The T-square is supposed to be resolved around Chiron and Aries is the goddess of chaos. And Mars is at the last decan of Scorpio. But the inconjunct, the yod shape, with Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus is further intensifying the disruption. Mercury conjoining Mars, Jupiter, next to Procyon, squaring. So it brings us something that we'll just have to deal with a lot of disruption and a lot of challenges around mainly peace talks and prevention of a nuclear world war. This is an incredibly volatile, okay, I'm going to say that. On a global scale, the entire world is going to feel the volatility of ritual abuse, not through ritual abuse necessarily, but they're going to feel the volatility of the disruption on a global scale. I'll give you an example. When the entire world was in a lockdown, I was going out to the streets and they looked like a North Korea, and something crossed my mind. This was several years, 4 years before 7th October. Something just crossed my mind. Hey, now we all feel a little bit like Palestinians. Okay, and again, I'm not a warlord. I'm not a big strategist of war. In fact, my best efforts to have a panel of security people to tell us the real challenges to peace in the Middle East paramounted to me having to leave because I did not support turning a peace party to a Let's Assassin Bibi party. And you can imagine that if I was in those peace panels preparations, then I probably was not a voter of Benjamin Netanyahu. So it was not from that motif. And I think about how right now in the world is kind of like the COVID times, but people feel the volatility that is usually so much so that people don't even know about it. And this is even when they know about, let's say, ritual abuse or even satanic ritual abuse, it's like, oh, it's something that happened with the elite in some place, if they even got to hear about that. And the dissociation levels basically were not, we didn't feel it globally, I think, since 2007 and 2019. Then it feels like this lunation is kind of another one. But because of the disruption, it's not going to be as expected by those who do any type of disruption. Neptune back in Pisces. This is October 22. Neptune back in Pisces with Jupiter, okay, conjoining Procyon, applying to oppose Pluto. Jupiter ruling over Saturn and Neptune when it conjoins Procyon, which is going to be very, very good. Procyon by now is rising in the sky, I believe. I think it's still rising in the sky. So this is a good news because we're going to need that. There's going to be a reality check on a worldly scale, on an intelligence level. What is the part of intelligence, pharmaceuticals, World Health Organizations, religious orthodoxies, secret societies in prevention of a nuclear war, or the other way around? Yes, some people have Jupiter return at this time. Really, really trying not to overemphasize on charts that are already pinpointed. But yes, all in all, favorable aspect for Jupiter, not favorable aspect to Pluto, but definitely favorable conjoining to Procyon that can remediate a lot of issues. Neptune will be retrograde in a bisextile with Pluto and Uranus, very close to Saturn, not talismanic material quality anymore, okay, because of the proximity to Saturn. So we're pretty much done with the elections of Neptune in Pisces. For those that did Neptune in Pisces talismans. And after the Saturn, we might have some elections for Neptune in Aries, for the brave-hearted or impulsive-hearted or impulsive-crafted. Okay, that is another thing that will be in the background. And then we have the Mars-Mercury conjoining Lilith, 23 degrees of Scorpio, last decan of Scorpio. Mercury already 27 degrees of Scorpio. Mars is invisible here. It's going to give us very deep undertones. For those that practice sexual sovereignty in the astral, this one can be very, 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 very potent. Just mind the applying opposition to Uranus. Okay, so those that are practicing, let's say, astral erotic transmutation, Kundalini rise, we have a bad aspect between Mars and Uranus. So this is very, very volatile. And yes, be extra cautious. Those that are grounded and embodied might have a crisis of release of issues around sexual sovereignty in the astral. But there is also the Sedna opposition. Mercury is in Scorpio, so volatile energy. I would not practice Tantra on this day. In general, this entire period is good for abstinence, but because of Uranus and its volatility of energy, it's not something that is promised. So intention is always good to set with Uranus, and honoring Sedna. Honoring Sedna can be very remediating for this. And Mars is ruling over Chiron conjoining Aries. So good meditative practices. They can bring sudden eurekas, but definitely there's crisis around those eurekas. Jupiter, Procyon trining this aspect. It's a very good remediation for understanding the core beliefs that caused a sexual sovereignty violation. And Jupiter is slowly applying to sextile Uranus, so we might have some eurekas. But keep in mind, Pluto, there is social engineering, there's nervous system issues to tackle that are in an applying sextile to Pluto. Okay, so there is kind of like a hidden remediation. The trine to Saturn Neptune in Pisces. It's the gift of grace for those, if you think about Venus as the evening star, I think, is the one that stands with the ones who lose the battle and protects those who lost the battle. This has given me the same vibe, but for the people who were exposed in the not just Epstein list, but this one is giving Opus Dei. The pedo rings of the clergy and secret societies. there is some support here. It's like it's being exposed, but there is some support here. Sun 3 degrees Scorpio. Moon in Capricorn. Sextile in the Sun. And what do I mean when I say that? There is going to be awareness that behind every visible name, there is a conglomerate of invisible people that are not beyond mind control, that are sharing the personality of the visible person. Okay, it's a personality code. And that factor, the understanding of that factor is going to be the support. Okay? Sun will just have been gone over the Saturn of Bilderberg's chart. So yes, this is something that I can see with this conjoining. Again, invisible Mars, a lot of psychic awareness, but also sexual transmutation of psychosexual problems. So that can actually be crisis and eurekas around the transmutation of those malefic, occultistic, sexual boundary violation, particularly of children. Okay, with Pisces, Jupiter, children, and particularly children that were subjected to be in the clergy or in any type of religious institution that is orthodox, beyond 500 years old existing. Okay, so those are not new. Those are organizations and that are existing beyond 450, 500 years. Or around this time. Okay, let's see if there are more interesting things here. Sun will square Pluto October 24. This is a closing square, and the Sun will square Pluto from the aspect that Mars was squaring Pluto at the end of September. Right after the eclipses. But the good news, by October 24, Mars is already 22 degrees Scorpio, which means that that when the Sun is triggering the Mars square, Mars is already in the last decan of Taurus, which is the cold cases decan. Its closing square is with the Sun. It's just a day or two. Overall, it's about a week that is very, very high sensitivity. Issues with fathers, leaders, anything solar figures, okay, patriarchs, is going to be very, very powerful. And again, I remind you, when the Sun was conjoining Pluto, okay, then we had the opening square, then we had the trine, the opposition, and now we're heading to the closing square. Right now, actually, the Sun is heading to the trine in this solar partial solar eclipse. So the sun will be wrapping up kind of the last conflicts of refinement between power relations and solar figures, entertainers, influencers, visibility, and it has to do with either investigative journalism, by the way, because Mars, Lilith, Mercury conjoining, particularly of cold cases, because it's the last decan of Scorpio is cold cases. It's something that's old. And entertainment to do with that. It can be Peter Rings, but cold cases of Peter Rings. Although Epstein is already a cold case, murder or army might be involved. Doesn't mean that somebody gets murdered. It might mean that we tend to a case of assassination. The connection between sexual sovereignty, pictures, and assassination might be there. And the challenge is, as always, coming here from the nervous system technologies. There's Pluto in Aquarius, innovative nervous system technologies, with Saturn in the end of Pisces, basically having to do with the religious beliefs and orthodoxies and slavery beliefs and secret societies behind the social engineering and surveillance programs, which is why the cold cases weren't solved. Anyway, yeah, that's pretty much, and of course it's in a T-square with Jupiter, supposed to be resolved at Chiron, that send us back to Mars at 22 degrees of Scorpio. Very potent cold cases being solved energy with the connection to sexual sovereignty, psychic sexual sovereignty, and the pictures. AI might be into the mix because Mercury is still ruling over Uranus. And Sedna, so treason. And here we're not talking just visuals. There is with Mars invisible particularly, there is the psychic information, and this is already an appliance sextile to Pluto. Yep. A lot of cold cases solved, a lot of understanding of the mechanisms behind those things, and upon disclosure, there is kind of remediation of the tension between patrilineages and lineages of power. So that is that's in the mix. Again, powerful kite shape, and we can consider it a kite shape with Jupiter and sextiling Uranus in a wider orb. So we do have a kite shape in the sky. We have 2 bisextiles, 3 bisextiles actually. A lot of protective energies to sustain the profound insights that have kept a lot of people and a lot of families with unanswered questions regarding their loved ones. Yeah. At the end of the day, it starts with it ends with what it started. Sexual sovereignty in spirit and in matter. It's not an opinion. Those that do ritualization, raping boys and calling them a whore, and then using the naming of whore to justify trafficking, rape, and so on and so forth. By the way, whether within or outside of marriage, um, it has a price, and the price is unsolved cold cases, also of political assassination. Um, Mercury square Pluto. Mercury opposes Uranus October 29. That's going to be a little bit of a volatile energy. Again, Mercury at the end of Scorpio, beginning of Jupiter sign, beginning of Sagittarius. So this is going to be some very exciting news. And exciting is not good or bad. It's just highly provocative news. The motive behind the publication is freedom, but actually the motive behind the provocation is actually creating peace and avoiding nuclear war. It's not going to look like it, though. It's going to be understood by the good old patriarchs, but the common people are not. They're not going to get it. It's just going to look like a provocation, and I think people are not even going to understand how it remediated a nuclear disaster. Again, to do with what I previously said. Yes, tending to those topics of sexual sovereignty is like not only preventing political assassination, but an overall global nuclear holocaust. And people like to, dismiss that because it forces them to deal with all of their bad practices of the common people, of everybody points the finger on Epstein list, but how many people are doing the same things, even if they're not elite? Some social engineered, some, I don't know. Yup, Venus opposing Saturn, Neptune, we talked about that. Venus conjoining Ketu, October 3. That would be in Virgo. When Jupiter is 22 degrees Cancer. Moon 19 degrees Aquarius. So Venus conjoins Ketu 16 degrees Virgo, ruling over Sun, ruling over Mercury, that conjoins Spica at the time. There might be a verdict around Israel, because Mercury here can denote a legal document, and Venus Ketu is of something that is an old issue, or that we are letting go of an issue. I don't necessarily see it as a dismissal of an accusation, but rather letting go of an old version of phrasing. I already addressed that in another video, particularly the in verbatim interpretation of the ICJ. The word femicide, I know there is feminicide going in certain places around the world. There's going to be a jurisdiction about that. And Jupiter 22nd degree, the murderous role of beliefs about murders, philosophy, religions that support murder, or religions and philosophies that support murder of people worldwide, receiving karma. I don't know. murder of children, the fate of murdered children, that's in the background. With Lilith on the Chiron of Israel, Mars 7 degrees Scorpio, separating from the square to Pluto. There's going to be discussion about children and about femicide. On the minute that I looked, it gave me 19 degrees vertex, but it's just momentary, so Israel is denoted, Hamas is denoted. There is an old verdict around femicide. And juristic interpretation in verbatim is no longer accepted. People would require a more immediate interpretation of the law in future times. But Jupiter tends to... Ooh. Jupiter 22 in Cancer can be Islam. There's going to be a discussion about murderous phrases in the Koran. Okay, Mercury is a book, Jupiter is religion, and it's going to be addressing femicide and the interpretation of the law. And I see the square. Okay, regarding femicide and genocide, I said it. The reason that it was difficult to prove genocide was because the ICJ was working in verbatim. I know Epstein, extortion codes, blah blah blah, but beyond that, that was the thing that they could still hold on to for showing an image of jurisdiction. And I mean, okay, you know my opinion, it's a false flag globally, blah, blah, blah. But specifically in terms of the juristic process, they were relying on the definition of genocide, and they were working in verbatim, which prolonged the calling of the UN as a genocide to what Israel done, and juxtaposed to that, now they're going to require to not work in verbatim anymore because it took too long to declare a genocide, which perhaps would have given the ability to intervene or to stop the murder or to assist more or whatnot. However, Jupiter in Cancer denotes of Islam, and 22 degrees is about murderous beliefs, particularly murder of children and women, and the way that the Quran is in verbatim, which of course Islamic people will say, but that's not how we interpret Islam. And there's going to be a square relation between not interpreting genocide in verbatim and not interpreting jihad in verbatim. Okay? Israel is smart. I talked about that. It's not doing anything that any other country in the world is not doing. And to bring it to jurisdiction, we'll have to go with literally the whole world, including Article 5 and NATO, as I discussed in a previous episode. And so that would force us to face the lethal passages in both Islam. Here I see mainly Islam because Jupiter is in Cancer. Christianity, very indirectly. Judaism or the Bible, I don't see it with this Jupiter. It's not impossible. In fact, that would be perfect if they did that. But I think that it's going to be more around Islam, particularly because of Muslim Brotherhood of Satan, which is so associated with the Hamas flag that somehow became the Palestinian flag. L'Homme Rebelle, okay, if folk can read L'Homme Rebelle. And yes, to rebel, those that still have the energy to rebel should definitely have a deep talk with people that know what to rebel against. Okay, and perhaps even more about how. Although intergenerational issues can arise, particularly when we talk about femicide and women-related things, because your ancestors were Nazi, regardless where you live. And so, anyway, paperclip. Anyway, Stargate, star. So, this is what I see for this Venus conjoining Ketu, which is opposing Rahu and opposing that is ruled by this Jupiter. Very powerful, because if we are going to interpret the Koran in verbatim, it basically calls for an entire destruction of entire humanity unless it converts to Islam. And the chapter about Muhammad waiting for 6 years old Aisha to turn 9. But it ain't like Haredi yeshivas have better, showing that permitting an infant for being raped, basically. And when those things will be discussed, I think we can say that the Messiah days are indeed here. So, yeah. But they will for sure find a way to say that it is anti-Semitic too. Never mind.